communication side. And Huawei is extremely talented in the communication side through their phone network, and the concept of what you can do with communication. And why I bring that in, and I kind of confuse people in this aspect, but I see power as nothing more than analog communication. And so the talent that they have in Huawei is to be reckoned with. And then all you do is go to China and see some of these huge farms that they've built out on the commercial and utility side, and it says they've started to figure out the issues with current spikes, voltage spikes in and around these microelectronics in a big power generating location. And so if they approach their service and support, I think, a little bit differently and spend some money in the country, they probably would see different results. Now, that's not to say that the IP side of where they're coming in with an optimizer that looks just like SolarEdge is going to be a challenge for them. It also needs to be considered, do we want a Chinese company to have inverters on the size of our homes being controlled through the internet from China? So there's also some issues that probably are getting pushed back very quietly through the federal government on the security side. And just recently an article came out, and it was today, that China put a small chip on a bunch of servers, and the government's trying to figure out what to do with it. So there's some security concerns with it. But if you put the security concerns aside, I think they just need to come in and provide some good service, and then SolarEdge would have a challenge. Now, the next thing that I would look at is if they came into the country and they competed with SolarEdge, how would they add additional componentry to the architecture of the home power system? And they are well structured with the size of their company, with the availability of engineering talent. You just have to be in China. It feels like the Silicon Valley in the 90s, where if you want something, it shows up tomorrow. And I'm talking about the access to supplies from an engineering side, from machining, from componentry to assembly. It all feels like it's right next door. And so their ability to make additional products that stack on top of their current offering, I think is a concern for SolarEdge, because SolarEdge is a much smaller company. They don't necessarily have the depth of all the other sides of the company that Huawei might have, or for that matter, Delta or the other Chinese companies. And so they're going to have to really put their thinking cap on and be careful and really try to work out the other offerings to compete in that space, so that there's a future looking kind of direction to their product. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So their tech capability, I guess, is superior. But I guess that kind of lends the question of the IP battles that are going on right now in Germany. Does that mean they don't really have legs if Huawei actually does have superior tech and is probably developing their own, or are they actually copying SolarEdge's product?
Oh, I'm sure there's some copying there. I mean, that's China. That's just their operating model, right? And so they, from a company standpoint, maybe they don't penetrate Europe, maybe they don't penetrate North America with a copied product from SolarEdge, but they're certainly going to be able to penetrate Africa, Malaysia, and other countries that don't respect the IP protection that is afforded to SolarEdge in the westernized world. But the way this works is if you copy something enough and get used to it and how it works, all of a sudden someone comes up with an idea around it, and or a different solution or a different way of thinking about it, and all they need is that experience. And so I'm not going to say that the copying is exactly the issue, and I'm not going to say that the lawsuits are going to stop them. What I will say is that there's enough engineering talent in China that they may find a way around it. And when you look at where the other inverters are positioned, all the string inverters through Rule 21 are getting boxed in on needing these module level power electronics. And Tigo has got a revive of the phase type device, right? And so when we installed this inverter in Hawaii and went through three on the wall and went to UC Davis and sat down and said, what's wrong here? What's amazing is we fixed it with software. So I'll go back to my previous comment where it's the software within the inverter that's really doing the compensating of what's happening on the grid. And so, the going to earlier comments where can Huawei catch up? Do they have a better this? Inside of the box is to me just a commodity or whatever. It's software that changes it. And if they've designed their box to be adaptable to the software, then, they can change overnight on the product like Tesla does with the car. And then all of a sudden now they're on a different playing field than what they were the day before. And so, that's the way this inverter market works. And that's the wild card that can happen. But again, they still don't have the service and support that I see that's needed to swarm the installers.
I see. That's helpful. So it comes down to the software ultimately in solving the grid problems.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. But there's still, it's software, but there's still some stuff in there that some secret sauce of the components to help with bleeding off voltage or something like that, right? I'm sure that there's still some componentry on the commercial side that it's changed, but again, it's mostly software, right?
Okay.
And then when you get into this, though, the other thing that gets talked about is cost. The way China works is so the China government has all the assets, and essentially, in theory, most of the companies are owned by the Chinese government. So what they can do is take the profits from these companies and then give it to the local governments as it works its way down, using an analogy of state and county and city, and they fund these different areas, and they have key industries and key projects that they want to see go through based upon its capacity to, one, sell a lot of stuff, be prominent in the world, but also employ their people. They got 1.4 billion people to employ. So they will dump a lot of money into a factory and get it built up to the state of the art that is required. One of the reasons we closed the factory in Mexico was we were having problems with Flextronics and getting them on board with some of the things that we were getting from Jabil. I mean, just simply a tray to carry a circuit board. Seems simple, but Flextronics was fighting us. Jabil was no problem. May1T, man, that was no problem. They were ready to go. And so you have to understand that this manufacturing capability to bring in the inverter at the cost of what SolarEdge is probably paying for their inverter, and it makes them really cost competitive because the government is behind it supporting it. And so the last thing is I'd throw in there is don't discount that manufacturing capability and the cost to be competitive. I think I've even heard through the grapevine that when Huawei came in, they said we're willing to sell at any price to start getting market share. So, when they do come in, SolarEdge is going to need to have to lean into their margin a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. And just looking over the past several years at the inverter market, it seems like companies who are in the forefront were never able to maintain their margin for more than a few years and their dominance, whether it's Enphase or SMA. Do you have any color around why the market leaders are changing so frequently?
Well, the SMA, it is German, and the Germans. I had a BMW once, drove 280,000 miles, and every day I got in the car because I'm an engineer. It would always surprise me. There was one more thing that I would see that I didn't catch, and I'd go, "That's cool." But they're engineers. They're detailed. They're slow to move. And so they didn't see this power, the the module level power electronics come in. And so the ability to